A lot of people interested in consciousness and the quality of life on the planet got very excited by the hope for humanity that the Mayan calendar culmination date represented. So what happened? Was it all an optimistic speculation? Or is there still relevance to Mayan knowledge, wisdom, and insight? A useful concept to be aware of before I go any further is the notion that the universe is a bit like a hologram. Holograms are created using a coherent light source such as a laser, splitting the light with a partially transparent mirror so that some light hits the object of interest and some light doesn't. Unlike a regular photograph, where one simply records the light reflected off an object onto a film or digital sensor, a hologram records the mingling of two light sources as they come together to create what are called interference waves. The actual recorded data on the holographic film looks nothing like a hologram. It shows the interference pattern formed when the two light sources merge. It's only when we shine a laser through it that it magically transforms into a 3D image. Even more mysteriously, if one takes the holographic film and cuts it into 4 pieces, unlike a photo, which would divide the image into 4 partial images, with a hologram, each of the 4 pieces will still reproduce a whole image when activated by a laser, and each one will have its own unique perspective. The basis of holographic theory is resonant with ancient wisdom, which asserts that physical reality is illusory in nature. What in the East is referred to as Maya, not to be confused with Mayan. In essence, the world of appearances made manifest by the observer, you or me, is much like a holographic image activated by a laser, and underlying the perception of a 3-dimensional reality is a waveform data matrix like a substrate of divine mind. This is not to say that phenomenal reality is not real, just that it isn't what it appears to be. Another key concept to have in mind as we dig into the Mayan science is another ancient idea that posits that spirit precedes matter. This means that the world of the 5 senses is formed by and dependent on a subtle hidden aspect of reality. In quantum physics, this idea is reflected in the terms implicate order, referring to subtle dimensions of existence, and explicate order, referring to physical matter. The Mayan culture differed greatly from ours. Theirs was rooted in shamanism, while ours is governed by science materialism. While our modern science has learned a great deal about the realm of physical forms, the Mayan shaman priests were exploring multidimensional reality in altered states of consciousness, which informed their science, giving rise to what we commonly call the Mayan calendar. But it's important to realize that this is not a calendar that measures time through the cycles of tangible celestial bodies, but a system that measures reality at a quantum level. It is helpful to grasp, just a little, the difference between Newtonian science and quantum science without diving down a rabbit hole. Newtonian science is concerned solely with the physical plane. It deals with the explicate order of forms and the physical plane of effect, where the potential energies of an object form a continuous sliding slope and can take any values. A car, for example, can in principle be moving at any speed between 0 to 100 kilometers per hour, not just in 1 kilometer per hour increments, but any value whatsoever, e.g. 10 kilometers per hour or 20.5 kilometers per hour, or 82.3468 kilometers per hour, etc. In quantum physics, however, potential energies can only take distinct values, much like steps on a staircase, where one can't step in between steps. One is either on one step or the other. Quantum physics deals not with fixed reality, but with potentialities, and describes how geometries organize energy, and as such attempts to understand a more causal aspect of existence through the study of the microscopic world of atoms and subatomic particles. At the quantum level of reality, there is no sliding scale, but rather a quantized pattern of geometry, an invisible field underlying the physical reality we experience. Kalaman proposes that the Mayan calendar system is based on quantum physics at the macro level, as different from modern quantum physics at the micro level, attempting to understand the subtle fields of energy that drive evolution. An unfortunate occurrence was that the emerging understanding of the Mayan calendar system became tramlined into our default Newtonian physics model of the universe, and misconstrued as the end of a 26,000-year cycle, a Western astrology concept, which would occur on a specific date, December 2012, and usher in a new era, Hollywood picked up on the idea and derailed any deep understanding of the Mayan wisdom as it entered the mainstream, and for this reason, now that we are 10 years further along with no obvious sign of positive change, no one is really paying any more attention to the Mayan calendar. So what was it really about then? Firstly, we should realize that the Mayan calendar is not a calendar as we know it. It isn't particularly focused on measuring cycles of time. It is really a system of several calendars, some measuring cycles in the Newtonian physics arena, such as Venus cycles, and others measuring the quality of the quantum field, such as the 260-day Tzolk'in sacred calendar. Of particular significance is the concept of the nine-step god, often encoded into Mayan step pyramids with 9 levels, and associated with the image of a feathered serpent known as Quetzalcoatl in Aztec, and a dark twin counterpart known as Tezcatlipoca. In a nutshell, the Mayan shamans appear to have been studying evolution from altered states of consciousness and identified 9 distinct levels called underworlds, which Kalaman posits describe quantum waves of energy that shape 3D reality. The crux of the Mayan calendar end date referred specifically to a single inscription that said that the 9-step divinity would appear in his full regalia around 2011 to 2012, meaning that the full potential of an underlying matrix of reality would be at hand for the first time. This means that creation has been unfolding over the last 16 billion years or so, and the underlying quantum field has been getting more and more complex, as new layers were added over time, each one adding a new potential to the game of creation and the human collective mind. Up until 1755, there were just 6 quantum waves in play. Then a 7th was added, and in 1999, an 8th, and very recently, in 2011, the 9th. For this reason, humanity has been experiencing an acceleration in evolution, which manifested more recently as the Industrial Revolution, followed by the birth of the Information Age in 1999, and now universal consciousness since 2011. In recent years, all of us have felt in some way the change in the quantum field, which has become much more complex since 1999. This means that all quantum waves are running at the same time, and we humans can tune into different levels, which explains why there is so much confusion in the world, as different groups attune to different waves. Each wave resonates with the brain in different ways. Some are left brain dominant, some right brain dominant, while some are dualistic and others unitary. More than ever, we humans coexist in very different vibratory states with very different frames of perception and experience. This change in complexity has been noticed by other thinkers too. For example, something similar is represented in integral theory and spiral dynamics. The integral theory stages resonate quite well with the Mayan 9 underworlds model, and further clarify just how different our perceptions can be when we tune to different levels. Each quantum wave operates at a different frequency, each one 20 times higher than the previous, and in addition, each wave unfolds or develops through a cycle of 7-day periods and 6-night periods, making a total of 13 subcycles. These day-night subcycles are attributed to the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, representing days, and the dark counterpart Tezcatlipoca, representing nights. The metaphor of a serpent aptly describes this sine wave form with 7 peaks and 6 valleys. After 2011, something unprecedented happened. For the first time, we were able to access the full potential offered by the quantum waves emanating from the divine monad. In a Newtonian worldview, we tend to think that our thoughts are unique to the individual, and that thought generates, apparently randomly, through chemical and electrical activity in the brain. But what if the brain acted not as a thought generator, but as a receiver and processor? Where do our thoughts really come from? Could they be transmitted on whichever quantum wave we are tuning into, as each of us elect to participate in the intentions of the cosmic mind? For example, when tracking the so-called Mayan long count, which is the 6th wave, a pattern emerges showing the rise and fall of civilization, indicative of the way the quantum field affects collective thought and its outcomes. Notably, since 2011, Wave 6, also called the National Underworld because it gave rise to the formation of whole nations, has moved into a night cycle ruled by Tezcatlipoca. Day cycles which are associated with the light do tend to give rise to new levels of civilization on Earth and are often connected to Renaissance periods of new development and insight. Nights are a different matter and are associated with rest periods of gestation. These are time periods when cultures decline, and like a snake shedding its skin, a necessary breakdown paves the way for new evolutionary development to occur during the next day period. Of course, we are seeing clear signs of this today, where all our existing systems are failing and simply not up to the job anymore. At no other time in history, however, have we been so populated, with dwindling natural resources and a compromised ecosystem. Those operating from the seventh wave planetary underworld may well see the best survival option as expanding to other planets like Mars and to use all available resources, not to improve things on Earth, but to seek more resources elsewhere. As Jeff Bezos envisions, making Earth the residential zone of an interplanetary culture. What interests me more is what answers will arise from those tuned to the newer galactic and universal underworlds. For it makes sense that their recent arrival is causing a significant change to humanity as more and more find themselves attuned to these new frequencies. It is also important to note that the pattern of civilization reflected in the Mayan long count largely took place with just 6 quantum waves active. It was only in the last day cycle since 1755 that the last 3 waves have been in existence. So we shouldn't assume that our current descent into a night cycle will play out in the same way as previous ones. Even though on the 6th wave, the duration of the current night cycle is 394.3 years, we are just 9 years into it in 2021. On the 7th wave, which is also in a night cycle, we are already halfway through it with about 10 years left. The 8th and 9th waves have already completed their first night cycle since 2012, and in fact, since 2011 we have already experienced 14 complete cycles, 7 days and 6 nights, of the 9th wave. And on the 8th wave, we are coming close to completing the first full cycle since 2012 and are currently in the 5th night associated with challenge. In a year from now, September 3rd, 2022, we will move into a year-long day cycle, which should bring in more clarity and direction to the world situation. I suspect that with the emergence of 2 new quantum waves since 1999, we are individually and collectively tasked with reaching for and integrating these new frequencies. Perhaps they will act as a key to positive and successful transitioning into whatever is being birthed now since 2012, and can ameliorate potential destructive tendencies associated with the night cycles, now occurring in the lower 7 waves, all of which indicate a gestational period prior to a renewal of some kind. The galactic and universal underworlds are new to us, and I think we are still coming to terms with their presence in the field. My sense is that we can no longer view life as simply a personal journey, where the prime focus tends to be on self-development and self-awareness. We need to understand that the real transition we must cooperate with is one toward renewed connection and interconnection. We have to move the center of gravity from me to we and beyond. The Mayan calendar system sheds light on the fundamentals of the quantum field governing our reality. And following the Tzolk'in 260-day calendar can be a transformative and insightful pursuit. Through evolutionary astrology, it is possible to map out personal signs and symbols in order to become more aware of how this shift into universal consciousness can be realized at an individual level. It can also fill in some of the blanks with regard to ongoing collective evolution. Did the Maya believe that the world would end in 2012 before the conquest? There are pre-conquest stone inscriptions that reflected indigenous thought. Scholars were actively discussing it for years. Of the corpus of hieroglyphic inscriptions, there is only one known inscription that mentions the completion of the 13th Baktun cycle, each Baktun lasting about 400 years, that took place in December 2012 on the Western calendar. This was Monument 6 found in the archaeological site of Tortuguero. The translation of the damaged text by David Stewart and Mark Van Stone states on such a date, "It will be the descent of the many strides," uncertain translation, "to the great or red, Ma, undeciphered glyph." There the epigraphers point out the ambiguity from glyph homonyms could mean that the figure of many strides could also be translated as 9-dog tree, many roots, or many supports. Either way, this is not a central figure in any other no text. This would be the most underwhelming declaration for a world cataclysm if it is one at all. There is more evidence that the classic period Maya did not believe in civilization-ending disasters than otherwise. William Saturno of Boston University commented to National Geographic News at the time, "We keep looking for endings. The Maya were looking for a guarantee that nothing would change." This is not the message that we were wanting to hear from the past. Reflecting a decade since, the obvious conclusion is that we were projecting our anxieties about the condition of the world onto another culture. And we were audacious enough to tell that living culture what they believed rather than engage in conversation. Apocalyptic disaster narratives, whether they be biblical or science-based, are comforting in a perplexing way because they are singular in time, unrelenting and unavoidable, thus giving us a license to abdicate collective responsibility for long-term action. Predictions of immediate disasters catch our attention, but we cannot even process a call to respond to planetary crises at a scale of several generations. If there are no days of reckoning, but instead millennia of long emergencies, what can the ritual calendar of the Maya past or present do for us? I am a Mesoamerican reconstructionist. I draw from historical documents and living traditions from the cultures of Mesoamerica: Maya, Mexica, Totonac, Zapotec, Mixtec, Purepeca, Otomi, and dozens of others. This cultural zone comprises over 50 distinctive living languages, some as different from each other as Vietnamese is from Portuguese. Even within each language area, you cannot claim that there was an orthodoxy of belief or rigidity of practice ever. At best, you can claim that there was a shared vocabulary of images and cognate practices, and at the center of this is a ritual calendar that lasts 260 days of 2 cycles of 13 numbered days and 20 named days. The closest analog in our calendar is the days of the week. A day named 13 Flower by the Mexica will be followed by the day 1 Alligator, just like Monday follows Sunday. What we call the Maya calendar is a system of several concurrent cycles with shorter ones adding to progressively longer ones like digits in an odometer. Since the 2012 debacle, I have turned my attention less to these longer cycles toward this baseline 260-day calendar. It is this one that you can find in Olmec ceramic seals dated to 650 BCE. We do not know what language the Olmec spoke, nor if they were even one culture, but their date glyphs can be read. The 260-day calendar was adopted by several language groups and survived several social collapses over the past 2 millennia. El Mirador in 150 CE. The classic period collapse in the Maya lowlands in central Mexico in the 700s, or the Itza in 1250s. With each new adoption, you see both the preservation of form as well local adaptation. While the Yucatec Mayatzolkin, Zapotec PA, and Nahua Tonalpohualli all observed the same day name meaning monkey, they would also observe 9 days later, a day name meaning either Lord, eye, or flower. If this calendar is not keyed to the agricultural year of about 365.24 days, why did it survive? I have now followed the Mesoamerican calendars for a quarter of a century. I have marked each day by flipping cards, marking on boards, writing on journals, and spinning cardboard wheels. I wrote its dates on my professional research notebook entries as well as dream journals marking patterns and synchronicities. What I discovered on my own is that it is precisely the fact that it is not locked to the seasons and the agricultural year that makes this calendar useful. It allows you to step outside the agricultural cycle to realize that there are biological, social, and ecosystem-wide cycles that are just as important. It is also still a human-scale cycle. 260 comes close to the human gestation period. It is easy to teach and remember. There are 20 fingers and toes and 13 major joints, so the shape of our body is a mnemonic for it. Following it, it becomes easy to generate heuristics to space events in time. I water my plants on snake and eagle days, check and replace filters on wind, change contact lenses on flint, start and begin diets on dog to flower. Day names with a numeral were also used to name historic individuals, cultural heroes, and mythic figures, so you are regularly prompted to remember their stories. These last few years, I have asked what it would take not just to follow the calendar, but to live it thoroughly, adapting it to my local milieu. Use it to think about patterns in time, just like millions of people centuries past. I had a taste of this during the pandemic lockdowns when the marking of the days of the week was not driven by work obligations. There were days when I could not remember if it was a Monday or a Tuesday, but I was certain it was a 7-monkey day. I live in a subtropical nut-bearing forest region of western North Carolina, where we put attention to massed years when oak, hickory, and beech trees produce more nuts than usual. Poor nut-producing years mean that bears make their way to backyards. Looking at 30 years of data on nut production locally, I generated an almanac with a heuristic based on the Mesoamerican calendar. Years when Venus reaches a greatest western elongation on a day named Earth, alligator, death, or monkey are more likely to be massed years, but autumns preceding a greatest eastern elongation for Venus on days eagle, flower, snake, or dog are likely to bear poor fruit, so animals will decline. With this, I am not saying that Venus is responsible for this activity, nor am I saying that the ancients predicted such a pattern. I am certain that this pattern applies to my local ecosystem but not necessarily yours, and that likely it was not true when the calendar was invented, as human-driven climate change has changed the seasonal patterns where I live. However, it is the use of the 260-day calendar that allows anyone to search for their own local time patterns. The calendar can teach you how to think like the forest you inhabit. That is the calendar's genius. One day, I hope to use the 260-day calendar to craft an almanac for my river basin of the Tuckasegee River, the second oldest river in the world. I also know that one day such documents will be destroyed just like deerskin-folded books rotted during the collapse of the classic period cities in the 700s, or were burned in the 1500s by Bishop Diego de Landa, who claimed that such books contained nothing but lies. And I must be okay with this because I have faith that such patterns, if real, will be rediscovered again. Ivo Dominguez writes that if the corpus of the Western magical tradition were destroyed except for the practice of gathering in a circle and acknowledging the cardinal directions, then an essential part of this tradition would be recuperated. I believe that keeping account of 260 days will maintain the continuity of some of the cultures of Mesoamerica. We leave the focus from a supposed calendar apocalyptic prediction to the wonder of mundane patterns in a time marked by a day count that is 26 centuries old. I get comfort in connection and solidarity with people across the chasm of climate-driven collapse and colonial decimation by following the same daily rhythm of day counting. How exciting times we are living in, filled with synchronicities and great opportunities of profound planetary and individual transformation. In addition to the Mayans, ancient prophecies from different cultures and continents coincide in referring to this period of time as the dawn of a new era. Expressed in various ways, they all give a similar message, as the Inca prophecy of Taripay-Pacha, meaning in Quechua, the age of meeting ourselves again, and the Hopis, we are the ones we've been waiting for. Also, they all concur with the shift from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, inviting us to create a heart-centered life based on oneness and harmony among all living beings. The prophecy of the condor and the eagle beautifully serves as a synthesis, the reunion of the condor and the eagle flying together in the sky. The condor represents the heart and intuition. The eagle represents the mind and logic. Both flying together symbolizes unity and ultimate integration of polarities, balance between the feminine and masculine energies, union of spirit and matter, and the visible and invisible realms of existence. North, south, east, and west, living in harmony in a united world. Among others, some relate to these times of great awakening as a sacred period of ascension and evolution of consciousness, transition to elevated vibrations in the fifth dimension and telepathy, reprogramming and activation of our DNA, awakening of the goddess and the divine feminine, the return of Quetzalcoatl or feathered serpent, reunion and activation of crystal skulls and extraterrestrial contact through crop circles, and transition from Homo sapiens to Homo luminous and Homo universalis. Independently of our personal beliefs, this crossroads is undoubtedly experienced by most as the acceleration of times and increasing intensity. While the old is falling and the new emerging, apparent chaos creates uncertainty and discomfort. Higher frequencies are affecting all of us one way or another, as we are trying to physically, mentally, and emotionally adjust to these new vibrations. These auspicious times are inviting us to shift our perception by releasing old behavioral patterns that no longer serve us and plant luminous seeds that will germinate in new realities and ways of being in our beautiful planet. It's the end of the world, as we know it. Most probably, the American rock band REM never imagined that their song, "It's the End of the World as We Know It," and "I Feel Fine," would be mentioned all over the internet in reference to the Mayan calendar. Symbolically, it first appeared in their album called Document in 1987, same year of the harmonic convergence promoted by Dr. Jose Argüelles. As we all witnessed, 2012 was not the end of the Mayan calendar, end of times, end of Earth's history, end of humanity. 2012 Hollywood movie. Apocalypse Now. Armageddon, Doomsday, Catastrophe, or Cataclysm. So, where did the idea of the end of the world come from? This date refers to the completion of a cycle in one of the 17 calendars that the Mayans followed simultaneously. Due to their perpetual nature, any ending was always followed by the beginning of a new cycle of the same length. And the fact that one calendar was finalizing a cycle, not necessarily it meant that other calendars shifted cycles as well. As explained by Mayan elder and Daykeeper Hunbatz men of Yucatan, Mexico, all calendars were based on mathematics and served as ways to synchronize with astronomical cycles and life's rhythms. For the ancient Mayans, numbers were not particularly related to quantities, but seen as expressions of the different frequencies and tones of the divine. While the modern world sees time as linear, Mayans considered the cyclical nature of time as interwoven patterns of macrocosm and microcosm cycles. For them, mathematical codes created cycles within cycles as an expression of Hunab K'u, the source of all that is and supreme God, architect of the universe and giver of movement and measure. The cycle that ended on the December solstice of 2012 was called by the Mayans shift of the ages, as it represented the end and beginning of a world age or sun. It was the end of a cycle in the ancient Mayan long count calendar of 5,125 years, known as the 13 Baktun Great Cycle, which started on August 11th, 3113 BC. In other words, December 21st, 2012 could be seen as the synchronization point or 0 point when the Mayan long count calendar reset itself to start a new cycle of 5,125 years. Carlos Barrios, Mayan elder and Ajay from Highlands of Guatemala, explained that the world would not end, but it would be transformed. Humanity would continue, but in a different and more human way. We are shifting from the fourth to the fifth world or sun, Jabba, and the change will not happen overnight. It is a process that already started. It is accelerating and will continue accelerating. In the new world, the element will be ether, which combines with the other four elements on a higher level. Fire, earth, air, and water will act together in a subtle manifestation, activating full consciousness in Mother Earth and humanity. In addition to the Mayans, other Mesoamerican cultures followed this cycle, referring to it as the dawn of the sixth sun of creation, as in the Aztec tradition. Galactic alignment and precession of the equinoxes. This date also referred to the precession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year cycle that correlates to around 5 long-count calendar cycles. John Major Jenkins explained that the galactic alignment happens when our sun aligns with the center of the Milky Way, a passage of 36 years known as Era 2012. In Mayan mythology, the crossing of the galactic center's dark rift, or Xibalba Bay, meaning the Black Road, can be seen as a portal or the birth canal of the Great Mother Milky Way, representing a period of transformation and rebirth.